right, people, it's May 1st, 2024. I'm Dave Rubin. This is the Rubin Report. We are on location from my hotel room here in Savannah, Georgia. I will be doing an event tonight at Ralston College with Stephen Blackwood and with Chris Rufo. Got to Savannah yesterday. It is an absolutely lovely, beautiful city. For those of you that don't know anything about Savannah, the one thing that you at least need to know, this is where Forrest Gump sat on the bench and told the whole story. We're going to try to go to that bench a little bit later, but it's just a clean, beautiful city. We've met some of the students from Ralston already. There's just something really wonderful going on over here. And yes, that is why our show today is at noon Eastern. And then the event that we're doing tonight will be up across channels very soon, but we don't take a day off over here. So here we are in a hotel room. I'm caffeinated. I've got paper and a pen, and let's just dive right into it. We're going to catch up on a couple things. Obviously, there's a bit of a juxtaposition from the decency that I'm seeing here at Ralston College in a red state in the South, contrasted with some of the lunacy that we're still seeing at Columbia and UCLA and some of the other colleges. We'll get to that and a couple other things that I've wanted to catch up on. Let's start today, though, talking about RFK Jr., because, you know, I've been talking about this wide tent thing and how we can get all of these disaffected liberals, the old school libs, and the conservatives, and everybody, if you just love America, let's put aside a little bit of the issues and try to come together. Well, what can we come together around? I would say it's probably two things: love of country, and how about we go real old school truth? So listen to this, RFK Jr.
Are you not nervous talking about this type of, like, cause I meet very, very like tough dudes, and they, like the behind cameras, they're like, yeah, we never bring this up, and you're just blatantly talking about it on camera. Is that because you walk around bodyguards around you all the time? Like, what gives you the confidence to speak like this towards your country and like really put them on the spot like that?
What's the point of being here if you're not going to tell the truth? What's the point?
Amen.
You know, the points that I made is now our government is using fear in order to induce compliance and to control us. And Franklin Roosevelt in 1932 said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. You know, and we saw people using it during COVID. We saw our government saying everybody needs to be scared and the media cooperating with them. And, you know, my reaction to that is that, oh, if you don't do what we say, you're going to be dead. Mm-hmm. My reaction is there's a lot worse things than dying, a lot worse things. And that Americans need to remember that. And one of those things is, you know, is living like a slave. Mm.
Isn't that just true? And we all kind of know it. And we know how many of us lived like slaves and took orders and stayed in our homes and wore masks that didn't work and sometimes got injected with things that we didn't even know why we were doing it, or even did it to our children, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or the fear that he talks about. There's nothing to fear but fear itself. The amount of fear that is constantly pushed on us, whether it's COVID or whether it's legit fears as it relates to a government that will not take care of the border, or watching lawlessness and calls for genocide at college campuses. Some fears are legit. And then there's just the concept of fear that is just being constantly smashed in our face. But the line that I love there, it's a Jordan Peterson-esque line. What's the point of being here if you're not going to tell the truth? And partly, I think what we're all dealing with right now is we have a political class that lies about virtually everything. And then we have a mainstream media class that launders those lies, meaning they cover certain stories or don't cover certain stories. And it's usually in service to the lies of the politicians. So all of the big cultural stories, whether it was, as you guys know, Donald Trump, very fine people on both sides, or it was the Covington kids are racist, or Brett Kavanaugh's a serial rapist, or we can just go on and on. Kyle Rittenhouse is a murderer, et cetera, et cetera. We've been pushed to the corner with endless lies, and that is not good. Who has been one of the prime purveyors of those lies? Well, of course, it's Anthony Fauci, who, again, I always say the guy should be living in a cave somewhere, and yet he's making the media rounds again. Here he is talking about some of the people who pushed back against him. He's not so happy with them because, remember, he is the science. He's also he's a very small man sitting in a large chair, so I warn you.
But it was total divisiveness that translated itself into a pushing back on any authority. You can't tell me what I should do. So that pushing back on authority with the already smoldering anti-vax from the measles group turned out to be an anti-vax, anti-science and then anti-scientist.
Isn't it interesting? He's very upset that people pushed back. A man who quite literally 2 months into COVID sent an email to a friend saying that masks don't work, so he doesn't have to put them on his kids during vacation, who was masking all of us up, right? Who was going to baseball games and having a hot dog mask down, then putting the mask up. And we all pretended that it made sense. You could sit on an airplane and eat peanuts and then it was okay. But if you stood up, you had to put the mask back on. And then he wonders why we're a little annoyed with his authoritarianism, and that we, of course, are still the bad guys, which then he can also they often push into that somehow you're also racist if you're anti-vax and everything else. But of course, it's not just Anthony Fauci. It is the actual leader of the Democrats, and the leader of the Democrats is not Joe Biden. Okay. It is a guy by the name of Barack Obama, a man who I voted for twice and I should be judged accordingly for. I mean, I definitely regret it. It's actually, I don't have many regrets in life. It's an actual true regret. Listen to Obama here. This is yesterday, talking about which side is a little better when it comes to telling the truth.
There's a difference between facts and opinions.
Yeah.
And the one thing that our side still pretty much sticks to is the facts. You may not agree with whatever's in the New York Times or whatever's on MSNBC, but generally they're not going to just make stuff up.
No.
Correct.
And, look, I was in office in 2016, and I would have loved to pretend that the election outcome wasn't what it was.
Right.
That was painful.
Right.
Yeah, right.
I mean, is that something else? Like the ability for them to lie and then lie about the lying. The idea that the New York Times doesn't lie. If you ask me which newspaper in America is the most fundamentally dishonest, which puts the most effort into creating a dishonest narrative and lies about virtually everything, including their New York Times bestseller list, which does not have anything to do with the amount of books sold. Literally true. My last book, Don't Burn This Country, should have been #1 on the New York Times bestseller list the week it came out. They didn't even put it on. The sales are all seen. I don't care about getting on the list of a nonsensical newspaper, but if they're lying about sales numbers, like hard numbers, what else do you think they're lying about? Then he has the gall to say that MSNBC is telling the truth. Like, it's absolutely incredible. So the politicians lie, the deep state, the Fauci types lie, the media people lie about them. And then there's a couple people, I would say an RFK for whatever political differences I have with him, a Tulsi Gabbard, et cetera. There's a group of people that are roughly trying to tell you something true. And we have to figure out how to get through the noise. We'll get to more on that in just a second. Let me talk to you guys about Privacy Academy. Guys, it's common knowledge that Google is listening through your microphones. Even the most anti-conspiracy people know this is true. But did you know that Google put hidden microphones in their Google Nest device and people didn't find out until 2 years after the device was released? Or that Google keeps your voice recordings and stores them for posterity? I recently listened to a privacy class that Glenn Mader held, and he said that Google has even tracking code placed into fonts that websites use. They want to gather as much information as they possibly can, and they don't just use that information to sell dog toys or cruises to Italy. They do it because they're working together with Big Brother, and they always have. Google's origins come from the CIA and NSA research grants. The CIA and NSA predicted that people who shared interests and beliefs online would also move in predictable patterns. They just needed a tool that could gather all of the information to form these predictions. I'm tired of reading articles about how the world is going to end and that there's nothing we can do about it. That's why I asked Glenn about what steps we can take to get Google out of our lives. And he actually had some great suggestions. He said that it's possible to de-Google your life and even wrote an ebook on the topic. After some discussion, he decided he would love to give us that ebook completely for free. You can download your own de-Google book at privacyacademy.com/Dave. I recommend that you do because everyone should get away from Google and take their online privacy more seriously. And now back to me. Okay, so we have a deep state guy, Fauci, liar. We have a former president of the United States running cover for the New York Times, which lies, and MSNBC, which lies, and clearly Obama is a liar. Now let's get you caught up with some current politicians because Nancy Pelosi went on MSNBC, the televised mental institution known as MSNBC, and my God, the person she's talking to actually said something sane. And look what happens when a politician who lies about everything is confronted with something true.
And Joe Biden is doing that, created 9 million jobs in his term in office. Donald Trump has the worst record of job loss of any president. So we just have to make sure people know.
That was a global pandemic.
He had the worst record of any president. We've had other concerns in our country. If you want to be an apologist for Donald Trump, that may be your role, but it ain't mine. And he has the worst.
I don't think that anybody can accuse me of that.
Isn't that something? The slightest pushback, like that's like kid glove pushback. Well, there was a pandemic that did cause some job loss under Trump, and then Biden got the benefits of that afterwards. Like the slightest thing, she barely even said it. It was almost like a throwaway line. And then you could see how quickly Pelosi gets angry at that. And you're running cover basically for Trump. Like, yes, that's what MSNBC is doing. But they are so deep in the lies that anything true, the tiniest bit of sunlight to disinfect that BS is actually offensive to them. But one of the other things that MSNBC is doing, of course, is just keeping people in that perpetual state of fear that RFK was talking about. So listen to Nicole Wallace, what could happen if that orange man becomes president again.
I've seen that toast a bunch of times, but it landed very differently this year, because depending on what happens in November, 7 months from right now, this time next year, I might not be sitting here. There might not be a White House Correspondents' Dinner or a free press. While our democracy wouldn't exactly fall apart immediately without it, the real threat looms larger. A candidate with outward disdain, not just for a free press, but for all of our freedoms and for the rule of law itself.
Oh my God, wouldn't it be a joy if she wasn't sitting there a year from now? Lady, it's not because you're going to be in jail. Maybe you'd be fired because you're not particularly good at your job. But Donald Trump was president one time already, right? And you guys still went after him every day, and he didn't jail anybody. He didn't force anybody to be in these clown court situations like he himself is in right now. And my God, she's not going to be able to go to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Do you know that they serve filet mignon and foie gras there? And maybe next year they're not going to have that foie gras. They might just have beluga caviar. Okay. And she's going to have to deal with that. And we're all going to have to deal with the repercussions of that. Like, it's just the level of fear. Remember, again, the line that RFK said, right? Like, what's the point of being here if you're not going to tell the truth? These people have so lost the plot on that. It's rather extraordinary. We'll talk about some other people who have lost the plot. They're burning down universities as we speak in just a second. But let me tell you guys about TWC Health. Guys, did you know that millions of Americans face an epidemic of sleeplessness that is silently harming their health and well-being? The trauma our minds have endured over the last 4.5 years doesn't just turn off with the flip of a switch. News headlines swirling in your head as you toss and turn or stare at the ceiling. You're not alone. Well, we have to reset, bring cortisol levels back to normal, and do what we need to for a restful night's sleep. When you lay down at night knowing that you have the keys to enduring a deep and regenerative sleep, it is life-changing. But before you default to melatonin, do you know that there are mountains of research revealing its many risks? In fact, melatonin has been banned from over-the-counter sales in many countries, but of course, North America is still going strong. From disrupting sleep cycles to increasing tolerance and dependency over time, if you're in the need of a deep sleep supplement, melatonin is not it. Crafted by awake doctors, pun not intended, like Dr. Peter McCullough and his chief medical board at the Wellness Company, who understand the mounting harms of melatonin, Restful Sleep Formula is an all-natural alternative to melatonin. Packed with ashwagandha, kava, chamomile, passion flower, and more, this powerful capsule has everything you need for a deep, rejuvenating sleep. And here's the kicker. With Restful Sleep Formula, you actually save 56% compared to buying each one of these supplements separately. Plus, you should save an extra 15% and get free shipping when you use code Rubin at checkout. Don't just dream of better sleep. Make it a reality. Visit twc.health/Rubin today and use code Rubin at checkout. Okay, so it's not just a series of lies that are the problem. It's also the people that are somehow, God help us all, that somehow are in charge of the whole damn thing and how they are just bad at pretty much everything. Now, we do have little pockets where it's not bad, right? Actually, I happen to be in a city that's quite beautiful, in a state that's quite red, Savannah, Georgia at the moment, and I live in a place that is also quite red and run quite well. But let's go to a place that is not doing as well. I'm talking, no, not Cali. You thought I was going to Cali. We're going to New York for a moment. Governor Kathy Hochul, who is one of the worst authoritarian COVID lockdown mongers, she was asked about sending in the National Guard to Colombia, and listen to her answer. And I think you're going to see she's a little muddled in her thinking here.
Governor, are you considering the use of the National Guard for Colombia or NYU?
What I've said all along is that we'll ensure the safety of all students, but the primary responsibility falls with the university. If the university decides to call in additional support, they have called in NYPD. NYPD has over 36,000 well-trained professionals who have already been engaged, who are available. So if the NYPD enters into a circumstance that they cannot handle, which I do not ever foresee, we have state police and other resources available. But the primary responsibility does fall with the policing agencies where municipality is or locality is.
You know, it's interesting. I'm going to give the devil his due here, or her due in this case. She's right to some extent. The first line of defense on a campus is the campus police, right? So you want to deal with everything in-house. Now, clearly, Columbia, the irony is she's saying, oh, well, you have to take care of these students and everything else. Clearly, Columbia did not do that. Then it starts falling on the NYPD. There's special divisions that could go in and do things. And then, of course, you might have to bring in the National Guard. But Columbia, for the last basically 12 days, has been an absolute occupied circus. That is what is going on there. They're breaking doors down. They're breaking windows. They're chanting for genocide. They're taking down American flags and putting up Palestinian flags. They're all of the stuff, like, all of the stuff. And for 12 days or so, they all let that happen. Do you think that there's a bit of a problem, or that they're kind of egging it on because they don't really stand up for anything, or that this is actually working to the benefit of the Democrats? I think they think that. I don't think it's actually true. But finally, last night, the NYPD did go into Columbia because the campus police obviously are not doing the right thing. And by the way, it's largely supported by the professors there, who also were linking arms and chanting all the crazy and all that. But the NYPD did finally go in last night. And when I show you this video, you're going to see some mayhem. But just to be clear, the police repeatedly asked everyone to leave peacefully. They said, you just can't stay here. You can exercise your right to free speech, but you can't take over and have these encampments and everything else. So when you see the mayhem, know that this is only after the repeated attempts for a peaceful disbursement had been just ignored. So look, it's not fun to see that kind of stuff. It shouldn't have to come to that, right? But it does have to come to it if these kids are going to ignore the orders of the people on campus and the administrators and then the police themselves. But you understand, you hear this guy yelling, media, media. This is a well-trained machine, the same machine that did BLM, and they want the chaos. You know how we talk about how the Democrats actually want the destruction of the cities? So the Democrats want you to see crime and homelessness and drug use in all of these Democrat-run cities so they can point to that as evidence that capitalism doesn't work. These protesters, they want the violence there. They intentionally ignore the police officers, the police orders, because if the police said, hey, could you guys get out of here and we'll give you time to do it and just take your time and please clean up and head on out. If they did that, there would be no media covering it. That's why that guy's screaming media. They want you to see people being attacked and everything, because then they will use that in their mind as evidence that the system is corrupt, that the police are racist, that we're all white supremacists, et cetera, et cetera. I thought this was just a kind of funny moment because you know that these Hamas occupiers, they took over Hamilton Hall over at Columbia. And here's a girl who is a protester. So she's a Hamas supporter, protester. Now the police are coming and suddenly she realizes, oh, maybe she was at Columbia for a different reason besides jihad.
They just barricaded us in. You're laughing. No way. It's finals. Can I go home?
I mean, how great is that? The light bulb went off. Why am I here? Why did I just burn down this building? Why am I fighting with police officers? I'm at Columbia. It's finals week. I have to go home. It's just absolutely extraordinary. So this is also, speaking of extraordinary, this is something else. So they're having press conferences, these people, and they have a press table and everything else. And here's a little jihadist, and she is something else. She's demanding. So they're the ones occupying a force, and she's demanding humanitarian aid. They are literally behaving like the terrorist group Hamas, trying to destroy things and also demanding you feed them at the exact same time. You want to see some privileged bitch? Take a look at this.
Why should the university be obligated to provide food to people who've taken over a building?
First of all, we're saying that they're obligated to provide food to students who pay for a meal plan here.
But you mentioned that there was a request that food and water be brought in, unless I misunderstood.
To allow it to be brought in. I mean, well, I guess it's ultimately a question of what kind of community and obligation Columbia feels it has to its students. Do you want students to die of dehydration and starvation or get severely ill, even if they disagree with you? If the answer is no, then you should allow basic, I mean, it's crazy to say because we're on an Ivy League campus, but this is like basic humanitarian aid we're asking for. Like, could people please have a glass of water?
But they did put themselves in that very deliberately, in that situation and in that position. So it seems like you're sort of saying, we want to be revolutionaries, we want to take over this building. Now would you please bring us food and water?
Nobody's asking them to bring anything. We're asking them to not violently stop us from bringing in basic humanitarian aid.
They're stopping the delivery of food?
We are looking for a commitment from them that they will not stop it violently.
They haven't stopped it yet.
I don't know to what extent it has been attempted, but we're looking for a commitment.
And the grub.
Did you catch that? No one is stopping them from getting food right now. By the way, they're also allowed to walk off campus. You can walk across the street and go to the bodega and get a Prime and a Takis. That's what the kids are eating right now, right? You can do that. Takis, they're nasty though. But anyway, you can do that. And no one is stopping them from, but they want a commitment and they want humanitarian aid. They are literally using the exact same playbook as Hamas. They're destroying the area there, which is what Hamas has done in Gaza by using human shields and building bomb factories under hospitals. And she's demanding humanitarian aid. Like, lady, be part of the cause. Get a little dehydrated. All right, so I came across a good tweet because these guys, it's not just you watch that and it's like, lady, you are the most LARPing terrorist in the history of the world. Yet for some reason, these universities are placating them. So I've got a tweet from Zach Kessel from National Review Online. He wrote this: Northwestern's administration, after negotiating with encampment organizers, announced a litany of concessions Monday afternoon. The list includes full ride scholarships for Palestinian students and positions for faculty. So these kids took over Northwestern University illegally. They demanded concessions. The university negotiated with terrorists, and now there'll be more Palestinian faculty. How's it going having Palestinian faculty? And you can have a Palestinian professor teaching anything that does a good job of it. But does this seem like, do you think that's what they're really going for, these kids? Do you think they're going, oh, can we get a great Palestinian mathematics professor here? But the concession is now we will bring in more people, in essence, to brainwash these students, and everyone knows it. So Northwestern, you are done. You are done, Northwestern. You dug your hole and you put the dirt on your grave yourself. Now I want to show you another Twitter account that I've really been enjoying. They do these great Twitter threads that explain a lot. It's called Quantum Flux. They wrote this: anti-Semitism is nothing new. Western civilization still lacks self-awareness. The far left embraces those destroying the free society they claim to love. 75% of Americans support Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, which also happens to be in a rough neighborhood. The jihadists don't only want to destroy the West, they want to destroy human decency everywhere. There are many in the East who want modern, free, just societies, including the people of Iran, India, and the moderates in the Middle East. Israel is on the front lines of this all-out war on humanity. The jihadists have faith in their vision to turn the world into Afghanistan. The free world must have deep faith in itself and must muster courage to defend our freedoms. So the reason it's worth noting that is, as I keep saying, they come for the Saturday people first and then the Sunday people second. Israel is just a piece of the puzzle here. But yes, they are trying to turn the whole world into Afghanistan or into Iraq, basically sectarian violence everywhere. Northwestern University, we'll bring in more Palestinian professors. Okay, we'll see how that's going to go in 5 or 10 years, right? USC, we're going to cancel our graduation. Starbucks, where they just walk into and they start yelling at people who are drinking Starbucks, even though there's literally not one Starbucks in Israel. Like, they are trying to destroy every level of decency. They want you to be wary of your neighbor. And you should be wary of your neighbor now because, or your Uber driver. If I got into an Uber and the guy had a Hamas flag, like, do you think that would be great? So they are going to try to turn us all against each other. And the problem now, as it pertains to national politics, is that we do not have a leader in the White House. We don't even have a cogent human being. We have Joe Biden, who's 81, and he has dementia, and the media runs cover for him. So here is Howard Stern, and this is so disappointing. I worked at Sirius XM. It was my first real media gig. I had a show on Sirius XM. I've loved Howard since he was on AM radio back in the early 80s. Was like one of my heroes. I've had multiple dreams of being on the Howard Stern show. It was the only show I wanted to get on when we were doing my first book tour. But he has just become a Democrat mouthpiece. Trump derangement syndrome, COVID crazy, everything else. Here's an interview with the elderly man pretending to be president. Just look at the body language of Biden, his hand, just everything about this. Ugh.
You know, the reason I'm so excited to talk to you was because I wanted to understand the tragedy in your life and how you dealt with it. And you're the kind of leader I love because we're lucky to have you in the Oval Office and serving as the father of the country. Because if you're a good father to your family, which you are, I know you'd be a good father to the country. And I want to thank you for providing a calming influence, an organized administration post-COVID, getting that vaccine out. I remember what the world was like at that point, getting NATO, getting us to feel comfortable, standing up to Putin, the incredible large growth in the jobs, unemployment rate down. I'll give you your greatest hits. The lowest uninsured rate in history. 4 out of 5 Americans are covered for less than $10 a month. Knocking off a few ISIS leaders, cutting the emissions in half. I mean, you've always been an environmentalist.
I don't think anyone wants to picture Joe Biden getting a blowjob, but that's what you just saw. That was horrible and disgusting, running cover for this man and purposely talking a lot so that Joe Biden doesn't have to speak. It's unclear whether Joe Biden even knows where he is during that. But to even say he's a good father, look, I don't know all the ins and outs of how he was as a father, but we do know that his granddaughter thought that he maybe molested her. We do know that his son became a crackhead. You know, Donald Trump, for all his flaws, I know several of his children and the spouses of the children, and they all love the guy. And I've seen them around the guy, and it's like they're all successful and not drug addicts and everything else. So would Howard Stern ever say that Donald Trump is a good father? And by the way, Joe Biden, you're not my father. You're not the father of the country. You are the confused uncle who we try to have leave dinner early because he's saying some stuff that nobody wants to hear. But okay, so this is what they do endlessly with this guy. They run cover him because he doesn't know where he is or what he's doing. We have a 17-second video here that illustrates that quite well.
Media outlets. I speak with over 6 million people every day. We've been trying to catch up with you, and I've had coffee with the Vice President, but whenever you're out there, we want to talk to you. Because I feel like, I don't know, I got your back. I'm just trying to, like, President Biden, get you to pull up.
I don't even know what the full context of that video is, but for those of you listening on the audio podcast, the guy's talking to him, Biden's staring at him right in the face, and then he just turns and walks away. He does not know where he is. There is something wrong here. Is anyone willing to say it? There's something wrong here. But don't worry, guys. Don't worry. If Joe Biden falls up the stairs or wanders off into the abyss or whatever it might be, we've got Kamala Harris. Now, Howard Stern just said that Joe Biden is the father. Listen to Drew Barrymore, who apparently has a talk show. She was in E.T. I liked her in E.T., but she's back, I suppose. And did any of you see E.T.? It's way before your time. You saw E.T. Okay. Anyway, here's Drew Barrymore with her talk show. And listen to what she says. We just heard that Joe Biden's the father. Who's Kamala? Yeah, you can guess.
I've been thinking that we really all need a tremendous hug in the world right now. Yeah. But in our country, we need you to be Mamala of the country.
Guys, we are at the seventh gate of hell right now. Do you understand that if Joe Biden is the father and she's the mamala, we are so beyond screwed. It is just amazing. I should note, by the way, that when I looked down a moment ago and I said, did you see E.T.? And I was looking this way, Connor is an inch away. You want to put your hand just in the frame? Can you just look? He's right here. It's a makeshift studio. You see what I'm saying? So there's a bed here. He's got a computer on a bed. Are you all right? I guess he's okay. He's okay. All right. We're going to get you some water later. All right. So I want to do one other thing with you to wrap this show up, because it's not, you get it. You get it. There's BS everywhere. There's lies everywhere. There's nonsense everywhere. There's people who are incompetent everywhere, but it does not have to be that way. And one of the good things that we saw this week is that DeSantis and Trump have buried the hatchet. Will DeSantis go all in on fundraising and maybe helping in terms of policy and everything? We will see. But they sat down, they buried the hatchet, and we needed that to get that wide thing on the right to happen. Here's DeSantis talking about how terrible Biden actually has been.
Abortion issue, saying that Florida is now back in play as a result of that. Your thoughts?
So first of all, I mean, if you remember when I became governor, this state had almost 300,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans. Today, we have 900,000 more registered Republicans than Democrats. Just those demographics, I think it's a very uphill climb. But I also think it's an uphill climb because of Biden's failed leadership and failed policies. And it's hard for middle-class people to afford a home because interest rates are over 7%. They were a lot lower when Trump was in office. Now they're through the roof, and their payments double effectively for the average price of a home. He's let in 10 million people illegally come across our southern border. Yes, criminal aliens. Yes, people from terrorist sponsoring regimes. Maduro has released people from prison and sent them to the border. It's been a total disaster. And what about the inflation? They said it would go away. Inflation seems to be accelerating. People haven't gotten any relief from any of this stuff. So look, if that was the record you had, I understand they would try to figure out anything they could to try to change the dynamic or to try to change the focus from the failed leadership. But they failed on fiscal, they failed on inflation, they failed on interest rates, they failed on the border. And oh, by the way, is this world more peaceful than it was when Trump was president? Not even close. And so Biden's been a failed leader internationally, and I think that becomes more and more apparent every day.
Yeah. That's true. That's right. And now that these guys have buried the hatchet, even just having DeSantis getting out there and saying some of that stuff, right? Because Trump is now, unfortunately, distracted with these court cases and everything else. We all know that everything DeSantis said there is true as it pertains to the economy, as it pertains to foreign policy, as it pertains to immigration, etc. We also know that the results of good governance, the idea, it is so incredible. People don't understand what a sea change. I know I talk about Florida all the time, but when the idea that DeSantis got to Florida when he took over and there were 200,000 more Democrats than Republicans, and now there's 900,000 more Republicans than Democrats. That's a 1.1 million voter swing. The idea that the Democrats have any chance in Florida is completely insane. There is no Democrat Party, thank God. And that is what we could spread across the country, not because the Republicans are so great, but they are great in some places. And if we can blueprint that and replicate that across the country and get some proper governance, and then not have politicians who lie about everything, and maybe encourage the media to be a little bit more honest, or just continue to fall on its sword so that you guys can just turn into alternative media and then hopefully get as much truth out of it as possible, well, then I think there's a way. All right, guys. I'm getting out there. Did we buy me the Forrest Gump suit? I think we have a Forrest Gump suit for me. I'm going to get a really tight crop, and we're going to go do some stuff. No post-game show today. Back in studio normal time tomorrow. Ciao.